There are going to be some good years and some bad years, but as long as you kind of have that long-term goal, that you have to just, you got to stay the course if you really want to see some benefits to your investments.
I am unwilling to give up. That I will start over from scratch as many times as it takes to get where I want to be.
You just want to make sure you will get knocked down, but just make sure you don't get knocked out.
So your only choice should be go focus on what you can control.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Kara Goldin Show. Join me each week for inspiring conversations with some of the world's greatest leaders. We'll talk with founders, entrepreneurs, CEOs, and really some of the most interesting people of our time. Can't wait to get started. Let's go. Hi, everybody. It's Kara Goldin, and we're so excited to have you here today and have our next guest. I'm very, very excited. Fellow podcaster, but so much more. Farnoosh Torabi is here with us today, and you may know her as the host of so many podcasts, but she is also just a total badass, an amazing person. And she started covering personal finance in 2003 as a reporter for Money Magazine. She later became a correspondent for Jim Cramer's The Street and host of CNBC's primetime show, Follow the Leader. And she's the host of the award-winning So Money podcast and the author of several best-selling personal finance books, including When She Makes More, 10 Rules for Breadwinning Women, and her work and advice is gold, I will say. It has been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Entrepreneur, so many more. And she's appeared on so many Today Show. I mean, you guys would totally recognize her. And she's a contributing editor to Next Advisor, as well as financial columnist for the Oprah Magazine and so much more. So welcome, Farnoosh. How are you?
Thank you. What a nice, and thank you for that intro. That was really generous. Thank you.
Awesome. And Farnoosh, so happy to have you here. And first of all, tell us a little bit more about you and like how did you start? I mean, how did this all get going?
Oh, my parents, like anybody else, right? My parents are immigrants from Iran. They came here in the late 70s. I was born in 1980 in Worcester, Massachusetts. And I always say that, who I am is part life experience, school, jobs, but it's also, my experiences growing up, my modeling, and my parents. I think, you probably have heard that Middle Easterners are pretty chatty when it comes to money. It's not a taboo topic in our households, whereas in maybe traditional American households, the dinner table conversation is about how was your day? How was work, sports, school? We talk about like real estate and money. And
was that always that? So even with the kid, like the parents talk when the kids are around. So like you.
Oh yeah, for better and for worse. I mean, I got the good and the bad of it, because it wasn't always a pretty picture in my house. My parents argued about money, and I was a single only child for like the first 10 years of my life. And I didn't have anyone I just was sort of like an adult, in the room, and they would have their fights and I would be there. So I learned quickly, especially from my mom's point of view, how important it was to have, as a woman, financial independence, because that's often what they fought about, was that power struggle. My mother wanted to buy something for the family. My father disagreed. There wasn't this dual income household all the time, although my mom did work, from one year to the next, but it wasn't consistent. And she would always tell me, you got to go out there and make your own money. You make your own money, make your own choices and your decisions in your life. And I never forgot that.
Yeah, no, that's amazing that she said that. So do you feel like being an immigrant, like she had different feelings, or do you feel like she had more freedom? I don't know.
Well, my mother and I should preface, we're only 19 years apart.
Oh my gosh.
So while she's technically my mom, she feels like a contemporary. I feel like, I have girlfriends that are in their, late 50s and 60s. And I also have a mother who's, in her early 60s. And so, growing up, I think that she, obviously I was her daughter, but I also think that there was this level of transparency that I think we shared that was not necessarily what was happening at my friend's house next door with, the age difference makes a huge difference. Like my mother, imagine she was 19 when she had me. I always think about it now because I have 2 kids and I'm like, okay, I'm 40 now. My mother, who, when she was 40, I was graduating college, or I was like a junior in college. I mean, and I have a 6-year-old. So I always think about that. And it's only until you grow up and you experience your own life that you're like, oh my God, what was she going through? Yeah. And you start to really excuse a lot of the stuff that happened, because I do think that, she was learning and was making mistakes along the way. And I kind of was, I was along for the ride.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I talk about this all the time. I mean, in my house, it was a little bit different. My mom didn't have me until she was 40. And so, it was also, both of my parents were 40. And so I always talk about, like, I had an incredible amount of independence because she was 40 years old.
They were done. They were like, okay, whatever you want to do. I'm not fighting anymore.
And so my mom used to say to me, just don't embarrass me and come home safe. And that was it. And
it's amazing.
Right?
Like,
yeah, no. And that's all she did. And
no more micromanaging. She's realized what is actually important.
Yeah. And she decided to switch careers when she was 45. When I went to kindergarten, she decided to go into fashion. She was an art history major, and then she decided to go into fashion. So, I mean, I, of course, didn't appreciate any of this until much later. But I do believe that, how your parents ultimately raise you. And we talked about money a lot as well, like growing up. And I think makes you who you are. So you ended up becoming a financial expert. Like, how did this happen?
Right. So I think the reason I brought up my childhood and the money talks was because I grew up with this fluency around money. And I got to college and realized, like, I'm kind of the only one that feels like the topics around money are normalized, And I knew from an early age that I had something to share that no one really else wanted to share, but it was important. And that was, how to budget and how to save and talk about money. And I was really curious about the money world. And I majored in finance in college, but didn't want to necessarily go down the path of managing people's money or sitting behind a computer. I, again, really was more fascinated with the narratives, the stories, the history, and the practicality of it. So I paired that degree with a degree in journalism. I went to Columbia after undergrad, went to get my master's in journalism at Columbia. And right off the gate, I started working as a reporter at Money Magazine. And it was there that I worked with some fascinating editors. This was early 2000s. And I started to see how to be entrepreneurial as a journalist. So in school, they teach you how to do journalism in one of many ways. You can either be a magazine person, a TV person, a radio person. Pick a lane is essentially the advice. At Money, I worked with editors who were also writing books and speaking and appearing on television. And I thought, that's the way I want to do it, because I'm sort of like, I always say, like, I'm the appetizer girl. Like, I don't like to go to a restaurant and commit to a meal. I want to try everything. So I have a lot of things I want to accomplish. And it just, for me, it felt right. It felt very me to be able to do what I love, which is storytell and help people with their money, but do it across all these different platforms. Didn't really think of it as like income security thing, because it really is that too. It's like diversifying your income is one of the best ways to secure your financial life. But initially it was just a lot more interesting for me to pursue it that way. And I think there was more job security in it too. So if my magazine job didn't work out, I had other things to fall back on. And that's actually what ended up happening. Was years into my career as a journalist, I got laid off, but I had a book coming out. And that book ended up becoming basically my parachute and the platform from where I began the rest of my career as an expert, and never having to go to that desk job in a newsroom.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was actually a minor in finance. I was a journalism major with a minor in finance. So yeah,
oh, wow.
Never ended up getting my major, but I always talk about, am a huge believer that if you don't understand finance or marketing or whatever, or you don't have respect for it or whatever. Like I always talk about this on college campuses when I'm speaking, like that's the place to go and take these classes. And I love, finance when I started like hearing more and more about it. And I was, my first job was actually at Fortune Magazine, or I should say I tried to get a job at Fortune. My first job was at Time, but because I just became so obsessed with the finance side of like, just basically what journalism was doing around this topic of finance. So,
well, yeah. And around the time when I was graduating from school, it was a lot of the stories you were reading about in the world of finance was the corruption, the Enrons of the world, right? And Fortune was very much at the forefront of covering a lot of that, those fraudulent cases. And I think, for the first time in a while, financial news became front headline news, front cover news. And there was a real thirst and need for more reporting and more reporters in the space. So I kind of arrived to the scene with a lot of job opportunity, and there was a lot of like new interest in what was traditionally like, section D of the newspaper was now page 1A, Yeah,
it used to be like the Wall Street Journal was the place that covered finance. And then, the others were just fluffy. Right. And then I truly think like your timing when you were there was crazy. So obviously we're in this crazy time period right now. What do you think is the biggest financial mistake that people are making?
Well, it's a rough time. I mean, not to sugarcoat it at all. I mean, we have unemployment levels we haven't seen since the last recession, the Great Depression. We have people who can't make rent. We have people who are furloughed, unemployed. We don't know when the next stimulus is going to happen, if it's going to happen. And so there's clearly a lot of emotions running on high right now. Money, if anything I've learned over the last 20 years is that money is not just dollars and cents. It's an extremely emotional issue for people. And what I would say the biggest mistake now or anytime, but especially now because people are really scared and worried and anxious, which is all normal, but to not make any decisions based on those emotions. So if you're worried about everything that's going on, the uncertainty in the election, the uncertainty in the markets, to say that this is then an excuse or a reason to stop investing in the stock market or to, well, who cares about saving money because the world's ending? Like there are people who actually think that way. And so they sort of throw caution to the wind. I would say that's a big mistake. We saw this happen in the last recession where the market tanked and the economy tanked and people pulled out of their retirement accounts because they were sick of seeing the losses, not realizing that it's sort of part of the journey. There are going to be some good years and some bad years, but as long as you kind of have that long-term goal that you have to just, you got to stay the course if you really want to see some benefits to your investments. And so I just want to caution people to not repeat those mistakes because those people who did pull out of the market in 2009 or 2008, it took them forever to regain those profits, if at all. Those who stayed the course, of course, they saw an 11-year bull market, experienced that. So don't let your emotions dictate your money moves. It's fine to feel your feels, recognize them, but ultimately go back to the facts and history and where you want to go and the tools and the path you got to take to get there. Work with an advisor, talk to friends. The other mistake is, I think, Carol, we often keep our financial concerns and questions to ourselves. Again, because it's a taboo topic, there's a lot of insecurity around money. We don't want to let it be known that we're making mistakes or we don't know how to do things or we've even lost our job or we don't have a way to pay next month's rent. So we just sort of feel like we have to deal with it on our own. That's the biggest mistake you can make because help is out there in many shapes and sizes, forms, but you have to be the one to first let it be known, right? So calling up your lender, calling up your bank, calling up your billers and saying, or your landlord and saying, I need to talk to you about the fact that I'm struggling. And these organizations are set up to help in times like these, but they're not going to know if you don't tell them. And so that's a big detriment to us if they're just not talking about it is actually hurting us more than we think.
And women today, I don't know what the number is at the moment, but clearly somebody was sharing with me the other day that there's been no other time when women have left the workforce in such high numbers. And I think, we're obviously going to see sort of the economy numbers on that. I, worry because I also think women working, and clearly we've made so much progress. And now going back during this time, I was actually talking to a friend of mine who's works in a hospital, and she was saying that like the number of even first responders that are women that, now that school is not live, it's virtual, they've got to stay home with the kids. And so it seems like more and more, women are kind of the brunt of that. I mean, clearly men are as well, but I worry, about women and kind of what that ultimately does.
Yeah. And I think it just reminds us of just how important things like childcare and education are to the solvency of our country. And in particular, the ability for everybody, mostly women, to be able to work, right?
Yeah.
Unless you don't have kids, I don't see how, a parent right now, a mom who maybe had a job but has 2 kids at home learning virtually and maybe doesn't make enough to pay for childcare can make it work. And it's like we have tied women's hands behind their backs. And I think it starts with, we need more infrastructure, social infrastructure, to give families the support they need so that they can show up more at work and be better at work. I mean, it's to no one's gain when women are out of the workforce. Everybody loses. Let's just make that clear. It's not just women. It is companies who miss out on that talent. And, it's shareholders who aren't going to make as much. Let's talk about what we actually care about in this country: money. If fewer women are working, that is a financial cost to everybody, not just households, but also commerce, the stock market, shareholders. So I'm using the language that we apparently speak right now in this country, which is we care about the stock market and the economy. I like to think that we care about more things, but the buck stops, at women sometimes. Like, we need not just women, but all types of people working, right? We need all those ideas and experiences showing up in boardrooms and decision-making moments. And it is to our country's detriment if we cannot solve this. And the underpinning, I think, for a lot of this is coming up with a solution for childcare that is affordable, that is accessible, education that can continue to work in times of pandemics and not. What did they do during the Spanish flu? They had school outside. I often think about that, what if we imagined a world where technology didn't exist for just a minute? And how would we solve the education crisis in a pandemic? We're almost relying too much on technology and not understanding how this is trickling down to really hurt families that can't support their families, everybody under one roof all the time. Kids go to school not just for school, but for food, for someone to take care of them while their parents can work. Yeah. So it's getting to sometimes the more foundational stuff. And I hope that now we're really realizing and reckoning with that in a way that we realize the cost and we won't go back to making those mistakes.
Yeah. And also if we actually do try and solve those issues, then it actually creates jobs too. Because the first thing that I was thinking is, if you've got first responders and there just aren't enough, right? Because they don't have childcare, that they've got to stay home. Like, how about actually go and create a facility, right? And, how many people would actually say, oh, I'm going to go work at that hospital because they've got childcare or whatever. I just think that it's not that hard. The entrepreneur in me looks at that stuff and I'm like, it's really not that hard. There's a lot of private hospitals now. I mean, they can just go do it. Right. And it's just people aren't doing it. And I think somebody needs to show up and actually do it at some point, because I think it's, super important. But anyway, so you've written many, many books, but the most recent one is called When She Makes More, 10 Rules for Breadwinning Women. What prompted you to write this book?
Well, the idea arrived, I would say 2012. I was about to get married. I've been covering personal finance for all of my career, and I felt like I wanted to write a book for women. This is my third book, and I wanted to dedicate it to women, but I didn't want to just kind of write the same old book for women about money, which is just sort of like, you're not doing enough, here's how to do more, the same old speech. So I thought about what's a problem that I'm actually experiencing. If I'm experiencing a problem, I wonder if maybe this is a more paramount issue. And for me, something that was kind of gnawing at me that I wasn't really talking to anybody about, that was kind of like this elephant in the room, was the fact that I out-earned my fiance, then fiance, now husband. And it was the sort of thing where I got a lot of side eye from people, like everyone from like my mom to coworkers to society at large, that there was this sort of pessimism, like doubt that my relationship could actually work, long term, with a female bringing home more money, a female who would want to have children one day, who would want to, like, quote unquote, have it all. How does it work if you're making more? What are the sacrifices that you're going to have to make? Could you even be happy in that role? Like, there was so much sort of doubt encircling this life that I'd chosen, Like, I think at the end of the day, I sought a man who, knowing myself, knowing that I like really source a lot of my sense of ego and pride and self-worth from work and earning, that I would want a man who would sort of be complementary to that, right? That wouldn't be so attached to his title and his earnings, but would rather play more of a supportive figure, helping with household and family life and stuff like that. And so maybe even not consciously, but subconsciously, I sought out a man like my husband. And I arrived at that feeling like I was not winning at the game of marriage, that I wasn't winning at the game of life, that there was all this like doubt and confusion around my life choice. And I felt like it was super unfair, but I wanted to also understand why. And was I alone? Why is it that it was ironic? I was raised to be an independent woman, to ask for raises, to save my money, to all the things, go to school, go to grad school. So I did. And then yet I marry a man who makes a little bit less than me. And suddenly no one is celebrating this. Everyone is like, how is this going to work? Oh, how does your husband feel about, And I was like, what? All of a sudden the world changed. And I was like, this is interesting. This is like the sticky stuff that I like to get into. And so I just started talking to women who I sensed were also in my shoes. How are they feeling? What are they experiencing? And just opened this like Pandora's box. And then I started talking to behavioral experts and gender experts and marital experts about what is going on. And I didn't want to just write a book explaining the problem. I wanted to write a book that could help save relationships, because what I found, the biggest, most sort of stop in your track statistic that I unearthed in all my research was that when she makes more, there is a higher correlation for divorce. So, the suggestion is that when, money's always a source of contention in relationships, but you add this extra layer of complexity, of nuance, and what happens? Like any relationship, when it comes to money challenges, communication breaks down and you don't deal with it until it gets to become too late and you split up. But also we found that, there is this, in some marriages, not all, but sometimes the men become emasculated. They try to there's more chance for infidelity in relationships when she makes more, on both sides, women and men seeking alternative outlets. And that, again, I was like, I just felt like it was not fair. Like, the world sets you up for failure in a way. We're not giving women and men the tools to be able to complete their lives in a way that they feel fulfilled and successful. Because if you are that woman who wants to go and be ambitious and make more and all the things, why shouldn't you be able to marry for love, exclusively for love, and that's it, happily ever after? Why do you got to deal with all this baggage around gender expectations, money, blah, blah, blah? And same for him. Like, this book is really for couples, even though the title suggests that it's just for women. But I find that women often share the reading with their partners, and it becomes kind of this marriage therapist in the form of a book that helps them to kind of find resolve and come up with a plan to better address some of these insecurities that they may have, or the words that they need to be able to better communicate around this issue.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm excited to read it.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. So let's talk about your podcast, So Money. You've done over 1,100
Yeah.
episodes. That's amazing. And when did you start?
5 years ago. So I've had some time.
You were early.
And even then I thought I was late to the game, because at this point, there are podcasters for like 10 years. But yeah, I started the show in 2015 after I had my first kid. I wanted to find a platform for myself where I could perhaps even reach a bigger audience, but not leave my house because I was sort of, motherhood. And podcasting was sort of that intersection of all those things that I was looking for in a way to amplify my brand and get out there more, but also on my own terms, the terms that I could manage at the time. Like I couldn't be getting on a plane and traveling. So It was great. The show is now 3 times a week, and I have great guests on like you and all walks of life. The idea is that we bring on sometimes really famous people or people you've never heard of, but they're all very accomplished, talking about their money. So not conversation you normally would have with somebody, because again, we don't talk about money. It's rude in our culture. You don't ask someone like, what was their biggest money failure? Like it just doesn't come up,
Yeah.
But the show I try to like really break down those barriers, get you to know somebody in a different way, whether that's Cara Goldin or Suzanne Summers or Queen Latifah, or gosh, at this point I've interviewed like Tim Gunn. Did you know that he didn't negotiate the first 2 seasons of Project Runway? He actually got paid nothing because he didn't even think to ask for money, because he didn't even think that what he was doing for the show constituted earning a paycheck, because he wasn't in show business. He's an academic.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until meeting an agent where he learned just how silence can, basically rob you. Yeah. And, all these these stories that I will never forget, that just to me, it's a reminder that money affects all of us. We all make the mistakes, but we all have also some successes to share. We're all experts in our own right through our life experiences. And that's what the show really brings to light. And then once a week, I answer listeners' questions. So you can write in, you can reach me on social media, and I take all those questions. And on Fridays, we try to give the audience some answers.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. I love your podcast. It's so good. And I haven't heard that one though, actually. I think I'm usually earlier in the week when I'm listening. So that's awesome.
It's called Ask Farnoosh. It's on Fridays. So send me your questions. And sometimes I have listeners co-host. So if you're really itching to get on and share the mic with me, let me know.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a great idea. So what is the best advice you've ever received?
Well, I had a conversation about 5 years ago with Barbara Stanny, who's a financial expert in her own right. She's like trailblazer in this space. She's written multiple books for women about money. And over the years, we've become friends. I've interviewed her on my podcast a couple of times. And she's all about helping women experience financial breakthroughs. So what is holding you back from feeling like you, first of all, maybe even deserve to be rich? Like, I think that we sometimes feel that there's a negative association with the idea of richness, right? We watch shows like Real Housewives and we're like, oh, if I'm going to be rich, I'm going to be a crazy person, or
yeah.
When you become rich, you become a different person. You don't become, nobody wants to talk to you. That's not me. And I think I had a little bit of that in me, where I felt like I was doing fine. Like in my head, I was like, well, I'm making enough. Like I'm good. I don't want to push it. I don't want to push my luck. I just want to keep making what I'm making and keep a quiet life. And, everyone's got what they need and that's it. Like nice little life. And she was like, why are you thinking bigger? First of all, why don't you think that you can have a better life and how money can help you get there? Like you seem to have this disbelief. And I was like, you are absolutely right. There's no reason why I can't be making twice what I'm making and still be the same person who I am and feel good about the way that I'm making my money. I just have to commit to that. Yeah. And not only that, but I think it was like discovering the why behind it. So maybe I hadn't explored that, and that's why I kind of stopped short. My why at that point after that conversation became that it's not enough for me to just feel like, oh, I'm making enough for my family. There's so many people that I want to help. there's such a bigger impact that I want to make. And I think that that's important to everyone listening, is like, if you're struggling to figure out why you might want to become rich or earn more, or even just 10% more than what you're making now, because you're comfortable and life's good and you don't want to disrupt that, and you think money might disrupt that. But think about what might be on the other side of that, of earning more. And at some point, maybe it's not about you, but what is the impact you want to have in the world, right? The legacy that you want to leave. Do you want to contribute more to charity? Do you want to start a business? Do you want to help your grandchildren start a business? Do you want to, go back to school, like travel more, expand your life, expand your impact, and you'll see how the money can benefit all of that. And you'll be more motivated to go and actually achieve those financial wins. And I think that having that conversation with her, I so appreciated that moment. It was like a phone call in my bedroom, it was like,
I love it.
An article, and then it totally turned into like a personal therapy session. And I was like, you're absolutely right, Barbara. Like, I have to play bigger, because why not? There's so many women and men out there making more than I am. And I am the same person as that person, like there's nothing that
there's nothing
says that. Right. So I just had to decide that that's what I want. And there's no sacrifice. It's just, maybe, and I'm not working harder. I'm working smarter. I think that's the other thing that I assumed you had to do. I thought like, I would never see my kids again. I'd be working like 24 hours a day. And no, it's just about figuring out your strategy. Yeah.
And I mean, it's kind of what I talk about in my book as well, that at the end of the day, I often think that people put up their own roadblocks, right? Or walls in front of them. And because, I have kids and, what would my life be like? Like, this is enough or whatever. You've now decided, right? You've made that decision. And so I often say to people, it's actually possible. Yes, that is a choice that you're making by not moving forward. But I think a lot of people just don't even know that wall is there. They actually make it a very big leap to actually say, well, this isn't possible if, right? Or, and it's what I talk about in my book coming out soon.
Yes.
Undaunted, yay! Overcoming doubts and doubters is that, so many, I had 4 kids under the age of 6 when I started Hint. And, that was not going to prevent me from launching a company. And so a lot of people have said, oh, you're fearless, you never had doubts or whatever. No. Like, I had all that, but the key thing that I had that is different than what a lot of people that I meet have is that I, had this, well, what can I do? And if there's a will, there's a way. And I figured out like time management, and yes, I had childcare, but I also, took breaks during the day so that I could go to mommy and me classes. And like it was just a little bit unconventional. And so for me, starting my own company, I was actually able to, set up this life that I was able to do both. And so what I talk to people about all the time is maybe your traditional role doesn't sort of work, right? For having kids and sort of making more money or getting a raise or getting elevate your whatever. But I think that it's time for a lot of people to really think about, what it is that's blocking them. And so often it's yourself.
Yeah.
That's ultimately doing it. So, well, this is amazing. So I always ask people the question, what makes you unstoppable? And I'd love to kind of hear your opinion. It could be today unstoppable. It could be forever unstoppable.
Wow. I'm unstoppable because I feel as though I have no other choice but to keep going. That's a good thing. Some of the best decisions in life are the ones that are made for you. Like, I look at my kids, I look at my mortgage, I look at, also the sacrifice that my family made coming here, to bring it back to where we started, to be the daughter of immigrants, to see their sacrifice. I got a running start in life, more so than they did. And, they came here, had to start over. I was born, with America as my homeland, where, the land of freedom. And so I feel like I owe it to them to not screw up and to not just give up. I want to continue that legacy out of respect for them. But yeah, also I've got a mortgage and kids. So I can't just take a break, Carol.
I love it. I love it. But you just moved. You moved out of the city.
We did. And we're so much happier. I think we loved I was in New York for 19 years, more than I've ever lived anywhere else. But at some point, your life adjusts, changes, you want different things. And I'm just 13 miles away. It's not like I went to Argentina.
It's so easy. You could still get in there and super fast. That's awesome. Okay. So Many Podcasts for those of you.
SoManyPodcasts.com. Check it out. When She Makes More. Follow me on Instagram at Farnoosh Torabi. We're having a lot of fun on Instagram. I mean, it's such a fun platform. I don't know. I don't know about you, but I'm really into it.
Love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much. And everybody, I'm sure you're going to love or you have loved this podcast. So definitely give some great marks and subscribe and all that kind of stuff to what you're hearing. So thanks so much, Farnoosh. And
thank you.
Really, really appreciate it. Before we sign off, I want to talk to you about fear. People like to talk about fearless leaders, but achieving big goals isn't about fearlessness. Successful leaders recognize their fears and decide to deal with them head on in order to move forward. This is where my new book, Undaunted, comes in. This book is designed for anyone who wants to succeed in the face of fear, overcome doubts, and live a little undaunted. Order your copy today at undauntedthebook.com and learn how to look your doubts and doubters in the eye and achieve your dreams. For a limited time, you'll also receive a free case of hint water. Do you have a question for me or want to nominate an innovator to spotlight? Send me a tweet at Kara Goldin and let me know. And if you like what you heard, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts. You can also follow along with me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Kara Goldin. Thanks for listening.